Welcome, everyone. I'm John Ryan for the College Football Week 13. It's hard to believe it's Week 13. College football seasons just seem to fly by anymore in this long career I've had in pro sports betting. But welcome to the show, Tony Mejia. We're going to break down some games here. And I'd like to start with the Ohio State Buckeyes being the first time they are a conference dog in over 42 games. They are playing the Michigan Wolverines, but this line opened at 4.5 at some places, and is now down to 3 or 3.5. How do you see this game? Like, I find myself trying to keep the subjectivity out of the analysis with not liking Michigan too much because of the head coach, who might not even be on the sidelines next year, according to some reports out of the NCAA. So I think there's a lot going on with Jim Harbaugh than we know, if that is being considered as a additional punishment for everything he's kind of violated the rules on. But what do you see with the players? Because that's really what matters at the end of the day. The matchup is a great one. It produces memories that last a lifetime, much like the Iron Bowl with Auburn and Alabama, which is on Saturday. But how do you see Michigan and Ohio State playing out here on Saturday?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because we saw Michigan finally break through last season. And I think that's why they're favored here. It was a dominant performance from the Wolverines against the Buckeyes. And now we see C.J. Stroud absolutely killing it in the NFL. And, his replacement has had his ups and downs, but he has definitely not as talented as or been as consistent as C.J. Stroud. And yet you also have, and I think this is why the number has come down a little bit. I think the money's coming in on on Ohio State, because J.J. McCarthy has really not been asked to do much over the last couple of weeks. And people are wondering, can Michigan throw? Is it just a matchup issue where they're feeling like, hey, we can run over Penn State, we can run over Maryland, we don't have to show Ohio State much, and that could possibly be true. You definitely know that the receiving check on the tail of the tape favors Ohio State because they have the best receiver in the country, Marvin Harrison Jr. Not quite as loaded as they were last year at receiver, but still pretty good and better than Michigan, certainly. So that they're going to be able to throw the ball. We'll see what the weather brings. We'll see what not having Harbaugh on the sideline yields. But from the standpoint of why Michigan is favored, despite the fact that Ohio State is ranked higher in the college football playoff, I think that's it. I think it's because we saw Michigan win last year, really break through. Just to look at the numbers that I have next to me, they ran for 252 yards, threw for 278. So McCarthy's certainly capable of dialing back and carving up that defense if that's what they choose to have him do. He's missed a lot of throws though lately. I mean, cost me in the Purdue game. I mentioned that to you last week. Missed some throws against Maryland that kept them in the game. And that's maybe why they have not opted to throw the ball of late. If you don't have to put the ball in jeopardy and you're just hammering teams, by who you have up front, you just run the football. And certainly they have one of the better combinations at tailback in Blake Corum and Thomas. So maybe that continues. But I would figure that you have to throw the ball at least a little bit to beat Ohio State. But they ran up 530 yards of total offense last season, in Columbus, and now obviously this is at the Big House.
I think that's where it's going to be different. I noticed that in the Penn State-Ohio State game that Ohio State's defense is much better than advertised.
Yes, very much better.
Much, much better than last year.
Yep.
And that's probably what's driving the money in on Ohio State too, because if McCarthy can't throw the ball accurately, it could be a real long day for the Wolverines. But home teams in a matchup of ranked opponents has gone 26-12 straight up and 23-12 with 2 pushes against the number for 64% bets this season. Ranked home teams with a posted total of fewer than 60 points and taking on a ranked opponent, 19-8 straight up, 17-9-1 against the spread at 65.4%. That goes towards Michigan, but I think you need more more nuts and bolts than just a couple simple trends like that to put your money on Michigan. I personally think the wrong team is favored, and it's not because of my dislike with Jim Harbaugh. I mean, I love John Harbaugh. What a great coach he is for the Ravens, right? But it just seems to be, uh, two brothers that I guess you find surprising how different they really are in uh, their demeanors. I guess is the fair thing to say.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I guess it's 15 out of 16 years that Ohio State beat Michigan, and so the last two games have been both top five battles, and Michigan has won them both. So 42-27, 45-23, and one in Ann Arbor and one in Columbus. So I think that's where your favoritism of not yours, but your favoritism in terms of the odds makers is.
yeah,
If you're back in Michigan, I mean, we've seen this show now in consecutive years after seeing time after time Ohio State drill Michigan like religiously crushing them. We've now seen that the tables turn a little bit, and I mean, I think Harbaugh was complimentary to Ryan Day, but I don't know, how much of that is true, or whether there's a true rivalry there. Ohio State Day certainly an Ohio State guy. So this is a great rivalry. We're going to see one of these teams, obviously, in the college football playoff, and the other will be on the outside looking in. So I always love it when the stakes are that high.
oh, no question. The stakes are pretty high in the state of Oregon too. I'm looking at the odds now. Back to the Ohio State game, real quick. That's at noon on Saturday. Currently, 81% of the tickets are on Ohio State, which is a bit of a red flag to be betting on them, because obviously that's the professional bettors and the amateur bettors seem to be all on the same side. That doesn't mean they're going to be right or wrong, but it is a pause when you see numbers that big. Only 74% of the money has been on Ohio State, so that's why we're at 3.5 at majority of books right now. Let's see what we got here with the Oregon game here, and this is a monumental game. I know Oregon State is taking the public money, and I don't
One
think.
quick thing before we talk, just to put a bow on it, on Ohio State, Michigan. Does it concern you at all that they haven't been tested in well over a month by a team that can really move the football on? And that was Penn State, who they beat 20-12. I mean, they played Wisconsin, Rutgers, Michigan State, Minnesota, teams that aren't going to be able to move the football. And we did say this Ohio State defense has proven it from start to finish much better this season. Great tacklers, excellent linebackers. But does it concern you at all that they're going to have to face the best offense that they've seen in weeks in the biggest game of the season, having not been tested?
Well, I thought that was the advantage Penn State had when they hosted Michigan, the first game that Harbaugh was suspended for, and it didn't work out for Penn State. But again, it was a loss of not double digits. It was a pretty close battle. It was amazing that they ran the ball 34 times consecutively in the second half and didn't even attempt a throw. That was kind of mind blowing, but we really don't know what the answers are why they did that. But I think this Ohio State defense has been waiting for this game all year after what happened last year to Michigan, and I think if anything, it's going to be a much lower scoring game than people think. But I think that Ohio State defense is really going to be the talk of the town if Ohio State wins.
Yeah, I mean, if they win, I think they'll pull that off, and I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will have a big day.
Yep.
Certainly, it helps to have Travion Henderson back. He was banged up a lot of the season, but looks healthy to me. So, yeah, look, I love it that outside of Harbaugh, both of these teams are pretty much healthy and good to go. Let's see who the cream of the crop is.
So Oregon is at home against Oregon State in the state rivalry. 13.5 point favorite, a total of 62.5. That basically implies that Oregon is going to score 38 points in this game based on the market. If you take the total and the line, it's basically 38 points. And believe me, when Oregon scores even 28 or more points, they are amazing against the spread. So safe to say they're going to score 28 in this game. I don't see how in the world Oregon State is going to be able to contain that offense, which has just been exploding of late. They put up 42 last week against Arizona State, who had been playing pretty good. They've been playing passionate football to that point, but they got thoroughly woken up by Oregon, and Oregon just seems to be in that mode where we're going to win this thing. We're going to win the Pac-12. We're going to beat Washington, and we better be one of the four that the committee picks.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems that they have a chip on their shoulder right now that is pretty darn big.
I mean, they're playing.
I don't know why you would bet Oregon State here, even if they end up covering the spread and I'm dead wrong on the analysis. You just don't fade a team like Oregon right now. They're just playing way too well on both sides of the ball, and I just can't see this game even being close. But maybe you have something that to say that I'm missing on this game, and maybe I should reconsider. But
yeah, not necessarily. Look, I thought the Beavers blew an opportunity to win that game in Corvallis against the Huskies on Saturday night. I went to my my client list to try to go. Let's go Huskies, because I love this Washington team. I love Roma Dunze. I love Michael Penix. I think that they've proven it in big games. Yep. That's the number one. That's the top combination in the country. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top wide receiver in the country, but combination goes Penix and Dunze. And then I looked at the weather forecast, which if you're an amateur handicapper and watching this, if handicapping the weather or looking at the weather forecast while you're doing your final analysis isn't part of your routine, make it so, because it has to be in football and in soccer. And it was going to be raining. Made no secret about it how hard it was going to be raining. So that mitigates the one advantage that Washington brings to the table. They've passed the ball as well as any team in the country, and then you can smash mouth them, and you're at home, and it's at night, and they still beat you. So Oregon State really blew an opportunity as far as I'm concerned. They had their chances. They were in the game late. Yep. So it's a quality football team. I like Jonathan Smith a lot. We'll see what happens with his coaching future. Obviously, he was their quarterback back in the day when they had Chad Johnson and TJ Houshmandzadeh and made a run in the Pac-12 and nationally, actually. And now he's turned into a hell of a head coach, but you wonder what his future is with Oregon State now looking like they're going to play a Mountain West schedule for the next few years, unless they find a home going forward. But so good coaching staff, good team. They've won the Civil War now once in the 2 out of the last 3 years, but both of those games in Corvallis, and they haven't beaten Oregon in Eugene since 2007. So that's quite a streak. The 3 games that they've won since 2007 have all been at home, and this is obviously in Eugene and means a ton. Really love what Bo Nix has done, the growth that he's shown. Absolutely. I remember when he was the laughing stock of the SEC because Auburn hyped him up so much. A legacy guy, a guy whose father played at Auburn, a guy who got the opportunity to start at Auburn extremely young, and then mellowed out and went out to the Pacific Northwest and really matured. I think he got married and dissects offenses. Dissects defenses, just takes them apart. What he did in that first half against Arizona State was extremely impressive. They have running backs as primary weapons, but he really makes those receivers look really good. And Tony Franklin, obviously, also one of the top wide receivers in the country, but they don't quite have the depth at receiver that Washington does. Oregon State, how just to play devil's advocate, because I don't think we disagree here, how they can stay in this game, particularly on the road. You force a turnover or two somehow. You control the ball with Martinez at running back. You somehow take the lead at halftime, and you try to stay in it and steal it late. But can they steal this game spread wise? Yes. Are they going to prevent Oregon from moving on to a Pac-12 championship with a win? I don't think so either.
Yeah, and the one thing, if you look at betting flows that I really like historically, which puts me on Oregon here in a pretty significant way, actually. I don't know if this will be an 8-unit bet or not, but it's awful close to it right now. Oregon State has 61% of the tickets, 46% of the money. So whenever you have more than half the tickets above 50% and less than 50% of the money, that is a flag, and it's color red. Conversely, on the flip side, you look at Oregon ranked number 6 here. The better ranked teams historically do better against the spread. The first half may not start out real well in terms of against the spread, but they make adjustments at halftime, much like Ohio State has done all season long, and they come out and they smoke the opponent and the game is over. But 39% of the tickets are on Oregon, 54% of the money, and that is pretty powerful stuff. Also, everybody and their brother is betting the over in this game because Oregon scores so much. And I think this smells like an under. 62.5 points. I mean, my God, Oregon can put that up on their own on any given week. But that Oregon State defense is the real deal. So this could end up being a game that is, 38-14 type of thing and easily stays under that 62.5. 76% of the bets are on the over, only 24% on the under. So I have a definite lean on the under in that game too.
I like the. Keep talking because I'm going to check something real quick. But look, here's the deal with that. They've kind of gotten DJ Uiagalelei in a platoon situation somewhat. They really have that special freshman that they really like to, whether DJ's playing well or not, give a series or two to, which I think kind of disrupts rhythm sometimes, but I understand why Jonathan Smith is doing it. He wants to get the guy legitimate snaps and game situations, and if a game gets out of hand or Oregon State goes up too much or gets down in a game, it's not quite the same. So DJ's the starter, and then he comes in, and then they go back to DJ. So he can beat you with his feet. I think they want to control the ball because regardless of how strong you feel about your defense, you understand that you want to keep Oregon's offense off the field. So I like the under too, but I'm going to check something. So yeah, go back and make a point.
Okay. My last question for the show, because coming up here in a couple minutes, we're doing the live NFL show at 3:45ish, and we'll jump on that right after this one. But here's a scenario I want you to tell me how it's going to unfold in the committee for the college football playoff, and just stay with me on this. Let's just say that Alabama is scheduled to play Georgia for the SEC championship game. That is that is actually they have betting lines on it already. So tell me this. Let's just say Alabama was let down the Iron Bowl and Auburn pulls off the upset, much like they did with Cam Newton back in the day. And now Alabama has 2 losses. They go to the SEC championship game and beat Georgia pretty badly, giving Georgia their first loss. Say they win by double digits, like 10-14, 10-17 points type of thing. Would the committee actually put in Georgia and Alabama as 2 of the Final 4?
Just depends on what happens in the Pac-12 title game. To be honest with you, absolutely not. And that scenario blows up in the Iron Bowl. Simply put, there's no way in the world that Auburn beats Alabama this season. And it's at Jordan Hare too. They just lost in New Mexico State, and that doesn't mean anything. It's just the fact that Auburn's basically starting from scratch once again. They don't have a quarterback that can throw the ball at all. And Alabama is going to take them apart completely. And you can catch my preview on that at the Sporting News tomorrow morning. And I'm also previewing Florida and Florida State, which is another part of the college football playoff scenario. So I will throw a question back at you. What do you think of the situation, terrible situation with Jordan Travis now being gone, and you got Tate Rodemaker, who now has to beat Florida. And I'll tell you what. You don't want to wish any ill will on Graham Mertz and wish him a speedy recovery as well. But they're very fortunate that they don't have to run into him in Gainesville this weekend, because it will be the freshman Max Brown who will quarterback the Gators. And although he can beat you with his feet and has a pretty accurate arm, as we saw in Columbia, definitely does not have the game experience that Graham Mertz brings to the table. But Florida can beat Florida State in a way that Auburn cannot beat Alabama. So what happens if that game is even close? Do you dismiss Florida State if they're even able to squeak by both Florida and the ACC representative, which I guess is going to be Louisville? What do you make of FSU in a nutshell?
I like FSU as a bet this week. Betting on road favorites. Our favorites facing a host that has averaged 400 or more yards per game on the season. Excuse me. The host has allowed 500 or more yards in each of their 2 previous games. I see a defense of Florida State being one of the, certainly in the top 10 nationally, maybe even top 5. And Florida's defense is just not good. So I think they can water down this offensive scheme, and whoever's under center, I think it could be either you or me, with the skill position talent that they now have on that squad and the depth that they have at wide receiver. It's truly remarkable, the depth that they have going forward. I see them winning this game easily, no matter who's under center. And if they win the ACC championship game in convincing fashion, they're ranked number 4 now. I think it would be a pity if a starting quarterback or an injury even to a running back on a team would prevent the committee from awarding them the spot in the playoff that they had for them the whole time they were voting.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that wasn't the question. The question was if they barely win. But bottom line is they do have an experienced backup. So fortunately, they don't have to rely on you or me. They've got Rodemaker, who's been there forever. Has a report with a few of those guys, and certainly that is well versed in that offensive system. So it's just a matter of practicing from here on out. And Florida, as you mentioned, certainly vulnerable defensively. That's an extremely young defense. Melted down when it had a game in Columbia, one that would have gotten them bowl eligible, and now bowl eligibility is on the line for the Florida Gators and Billy Napier. At home in Gainesville, that will make a difference, but I'm with you in terms of Florida State winning that game. I just don't know by how much, because that is a rivalry game, and it will be a situation where, but with bowl eligibility on the line, with the opportunity to hand Florida State their first loss, those Gator Nation's going to be out in full throat. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that one. I believe we have the NFL up next.
Yep, you got it. It's going to be like Georgia has to win this SEC conference, or it's going to get messy for that committee. If they have to decide between Georgia with 1 loss and a non-SEC champion because Alabama beat them, and kicking Texas out,
we'll be doing a bunch of these shows, John. So we get to look at that once it happens. But absolutely, look, if Georgia and Alabama play a tight one in Atlanta early December, and we'll talk about this also. But I already did the look ahead lines column 2 weeks ago because it looked like these 3 games in the Pac-12, ACC, and SEC were all coming down the pike, and that's exactly how they will unfold so long as the Civil War in the Pac-12 goes well. You could see this scenario potentially unfolding, and Texas, we know who they're obviously rooting for and what chaos they want. But yeah, Georgia, Alabama, if it comes down to a field goal late and Alabama wins, committee has to decide between Georgia and Alabama. I would potentially, based on how that game goes, would lean Georgia, because Georgia's been the most dominant team all year, and I think that's what you reward. But we shall see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me here on the Week 13 College Football Sports Betting Show. We're now going to end this show, and we're going to tee up the one for the NFL, which is going to be really good, especially after that wild game in Kansas City last night. A lot to talk about on that. So until then, remember to always bet with your head, not over it. May all the wins be yours.